variances, specifically one way, two way, three way, and four-way variances. So let's get started. So your overhead variance first and foremost, it starts with your over applied or under applied overhead. Okay. Now, over applied or under applied overhead does not give enough information about fixed or variable. So we will again split this into flexible budget overhead variance and production volume variance. This is called as this is one way, this is called as two way, and after you find out your flexible budget overhead variance, you're splitting this into overhead spending variance and variable overhead efficiency variance. So 1, 2 and 3, these are called three-way variances. Once you have found out overhead spending variance in total, you will split this into fixed and variable overhead. Then this will become 1, 2, 3, 4. Four-way variances. Don't be overwhelmed uh, by this whole topic that this is split into two, this is split into three. Let's go ahead and create a chart to find out what is over applied, what is under applied, and how you find out all of these variances. Okay, this is my applied overhead. Okay, what is my actual overhead? Actual amount spent on fixed and actual amount spent on variable. What is my applied overhead for fixed and variable? I am going to apply it to my actual output into standard hours allowed per unit into standard rate per hour. Right? Same way, variable overhead as well, actual output into standard hours allowed into standard rate per hour. Okay. Now, the difference between, let me pick another, okay, the difference between actual overhead and applied overhead, it could be either over applied or under applied. What does over applied mean? My applied overhead is greater than actual. This is over applied. And under applied means my applied overhead is lesser than actual. Under applied. Now, from the perspective of variances, if you think about it, actual is my only actual amount. Applied, I am using standard rates for applying those overheads to my budget. So, if my actual amount is lesser than budgeted, let's say applied is budgeted, is that a situation that is favorable to us? Of course. So, over applied overhead is supposed to be a favorable variance. Now, if my actual costs are greater than what I have applied in the budget, then it is an unfavorable situation. Okay, part 1 done. One step, one way variances. Now, let's move on and put in a fixed, sorry, it's flexible. Flexible based on hours allowed. Okay, there is another flexible budget that is based on actual hours worked. Now flexible budget, that is based on actual hours allowed. Let's see what comes under fixed. You will take the budgeted fixed overhead amount, just the straight up budgeted amount for flexible budget. And under variable, you will take the same formula as the one you took in applied, because this is based on standard hours allowed. So actual output into standard hours allowed into standard rate per hour. But when it comes to flexible budget based on actual hours worked, I would say fixed is my budgeted amount, okay. But for variable, it has to be actual output into actual hours worked into actual rate per hour. All right. Now, if you look at these two parts, flexible budget based on hours allowed and your applied overhead, you see that variable overhead is same here, so there won't be any variance. The only difference is in the fixed overhead. So the total budgeted amount is taken here. This is also based on budgeted output, correct, budgeted production, but this is based on actual production. So then this is called as your production volume variance. Production volume variance. Okay, so in a production volume variance, you are checking the difference between the output produced, that was budgeted, versus the actual output produced. Here, if the budgeted output is greater than actual output produced, it is an unfavorable situation for me. I thought I would produce so and so units, but I actually produced lesser than that, so it's unfavorable variance. In an opposite case, when actual production is greater than budgeted, at that time it is a favorable variance, correct. So if you take a look at the difference between actual overhead and the flexible budget based on hours allowed, this is called as flexible budget overhead variance. Now, if you ask me what is favorable, what is unfavorable, this is from the goal of minimizing costs, correct. Now, if my actual costs are higher than my budgeted, that is flexible budget, then it is unfavorable. Actual greater than flexible budget, unfavorable. If my actual costs are lesser than flexible budget, then it is favorable. Okay, this was my two-way variance, flexible budget overhead and production volume. Now let's take a look at the three-way variance, that is the difference between flexible budget based on actual hours worked and flexible budget based on hours allowed. Here fixed overhead is the same. The only difference between variable overhead is the hours worked, okay, the efficiency. So here it is actual hours worked, and sorry, this is standard rate. Okay, here it is actual hours worked and here it is standard hours worked. So this will go as variable overhead efficiency variance. Perfect. Now the difference between actual overhead and flexible budget based on actual hours worked, that is called as spending variance. It accounts for the amount that you have spent. So overhead spending variance, if you bifurcate this between fixed and variable, you will go with fixed overhead and variable overhead spending variance. Alright. That was your concept of variances. So as I told you, when you're analyzing costs, you will check if actual cost is higher than budgeted cost, then it is a unfavorable variance. Actual cost is lesser than budgeted cost, favorable variance. But for production volume variance, our goal is to maximize production. We want actual production to be more than budgeted, correct? If actual production is less than budgeted, then it is unfavorable. If it's more than budgeted, then it is favorable. I hope I was able to do justice to this concept. Let me know if I should come up with a numerical example as well. So see you in the next video. Bye.